Cool. So, Blender comes with a lot of different things that help you to model, not just your standard tools.
Can you go in? If you're not going to listen, can you leave?
Oh.
People are actually trying to.
Just place the station. Yeah, not your place to what's that? So, if you're going to watch along, but if not, keep it quiet, right? Cool. So, like I said, a lot more tools than just your standard, pulling vertices, that sort of stuff. Modifiers are really, really important to get you really complex shapes. So the one I mainly like to use is subdivision, mainly because subdivision gives you some really smooth and complex shapes. It's mainly just knowing about how you can move around your vertices to get a decent, topology with your model. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start using a few different modifiers and start creating quite a complex shape. It's not going to mean anything. It's not going to be a shape that actually means anything, but it's going to be more or less for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to use planes. Planes are a really important one to start using because you can use your standard geometry and it gives you a good baseline for your models. But if you've got a model that you're going to create that's really complex and it's not going to come out of you can't get from a cube to it or from a cylinder to it, your individual planes are a fantastic thing to use because they are just standard polygons. It's just one single quad polygon on its own, and from there you can move it around and build your mesh up, on its own. So 9 times out of 10 you'll be modeling a symmetrical object. So what I like to always do with these is set it up for that and use symmetry, because then you're only doing half a job. It makes it a lot easier for yourself. So what I would do first of all, with this, go to edit mode, Control R to cut it in half from a loop cut, and then just delete one side. Just delete faces. So now I've got my one half, and make sure I'm keeping it in that middle, that y-axis there. I'll then select it, go to my modifiers, add modifier, and go to add mirror. So now, no matter what, if I move anything, it'll do it exactly the same on the other side, which is really pretty cool.
So much easier.
These are things you can. It's fantastic for doing it for character models, that sort of thing. But if you, like I said, 9 times out of 10 you'll be doing a symmetrical model. So now if I start extruding some things out, like that, as you can see, I'm getting the exact same shape on the other side. Now the other thing I do like to use, which in terms of modeling, no matter what, precision is really, really important. So making sure you're keeping things locked to axes and that sort of thing. Because say if I just do extruding like this, then like this, and I go like that, you can see it's already wonky. It's not going precise how I want. So what I always like to do is stick to your axes. So whenever you press E or you press G to grab it or S to scale, always lock it to an axis if you can. So E, I'm pressing E, it's not locked. So what I'm going to do, I want to go downwards. So I'm going to press Z to lock it to Z, and it will go only downwards. So I'm going to put that there. I'm going to press G to move this. I want to be like a nice slant. So G, I'm going to lock it to the X. Best thing to remember, red is X, green is Y, and blue is Z. So X to go along that. Red one, bud. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So if I wanted to move it on the X and the Y, just not the Z, I would do scale, shift, Z. See, it only does it on the X and Y. You see they're highlighted there with the extra lines you get. So then it's locking it away from the Z, like Ryan said. So what I do now, bring it down again like that. And what I can do is I'm going to scale the whole thing, and you can see with this mirror modifier, because it affects the entire model of it, it's really, really cool. So you can, whatever I do this side, it'll do this side. So I'm going to finish this up by just doing one more along here into the middle.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So remember last time that you could play, when we were selecting certain thing, one side was blue and the other side was red.
Yeah. So that's your normals. So normals, I think I might have explained them a little bit last year, but I'll go over it again. Normals are the way that polygons work. So think of your polygon as, I'll show you actually, as this plane here. So if I zoom into this, now if I put on the normals mode, so face orientation, you see you've got this blue side. Blue is good. So blue is what you're going to see. Blue is what the computer is going to render. Your normals, which is the other side, which is the red, is nothing. So think of it like a two-way mirror. You've got the red side, which you can see through. You can't see anything. The blue side is where you're going to see. That's where your geometry is going to be. It's a way of space saving with 3D. Because if it had double-sided, that's double the amount that the computer's got to render each time. That's why when you're playing video games and stuff, if you clip into a character, you can see out of it. You can't see the insides because we don't need it inside. You're never going to see it really, so there's no point in having it. And it's a way of space saving that they've developed that system. So that's the sort of thing I say for the end of the model. So say if this side here was, So if I go and finish my model and I go, oh, okay, that's wrong. That's red. I want that to be blue because that's the outside. Very, very quick trick you can do is just go into edit mode, select it all, and Shift N, and that just recalculates the normals, and it flips it all out to the outside. If that doesn't work, you can literally individually select shapes, go to mesh, go to normals, and then flip it the other way.
So you can also do the inside as well.
Yeah, so if I wanted to have this side here, like this, if I wanted to have this the other way around, flip that. But now, if I was looking at it from this angle, you'd look under here, all of that, I wouldn't be able to see this right now in a game engine. Flip it like this way, I'd be able to see that and all the blue, but you wouldn't be able to see that, so it's invisible.
Well, if you need both sides to be
So,
blue.
If you need it to be both sides to be blue, you need to either add some thickness to it, or in game engines there's a thing called double-sided geometry, which you can activate, which means it'll calculate both sides, so it depends on what you need it for. 9 times out of 10 you won't need to. Exactly, yeah. And I'll show that in a second. So, one more thing I like to do on the mirror tool, I like to activate clipping. Clipping means, I can't go any further than that center line. So that's quite good. I forgot about that one. So clipping here on mirror modifier, if I untick it and move this along, it can go through itself, which you don't want. Have clipping on, G and X, and it will just lock right to the center there, so it won't go any further than that. And that keeps it nice and symmetrical. So, I'm going to finish off my model here. I'm just going to grab these points, extrude these out. That. I'm going to scale it in a little bit. Same as that one, I'm going to pull that in. Grab that. Extrude these up. Now that's another one you can do with your individual vertices. So the extrusion tool isn't just for faces, so you haven't just got to get a face tool and press E and extrude that. You can extrude your edges like that. You can also extrude your individual vertices. And then from there you can sort of build, polygons at that point. So you can start building things up and doing it individually, which in some ways is a very good way of working, but some is not. Now, when I do complex shapes, when I work with a lot of complex shapes, I 9 times out of 10 will always use my snapping tools. Snapping tools are another fantastic thing you can use, and you've got a lot of sort of diversity with it. You can use them for multiple things. So up here on the top tab, got this little 3 dots. Usually it'll be on increment. Increment is where it will lock and snap to the grid, the world grid. You'll use that sometimes if you're making modular buildings, that sort of stuff. It's really good to have the grid system working, but I like to use it for other reasons. So with here, I can select the vertexes. So I've selected my vertex, that's up there. And if I press G and move this, if I hold Control now and hover over another vertex, you see it'll snap it to that location on that axis. Same as if I do it to Z, it'll snap it to that height. So now it's this point here is the exact same point height as this one. Now if I do X and then G and then X, it's now the same length of that one, so it's in the same part on the X-axis as that, which is really, really good for getting really precise modeling. And again, like I said, you can use the same thing for your edges as well. So say this edge down here, I want it to be the same, up here, same as this. It works in different ways. It all depends on what you're sort of using it for. That's what I like to do there. So what I want to do as well is fix that. So now I pulled this up. You didn't see what I did. I've got that bottom edge. I pulled this up and I'm joining it onto this edge here. Now the issue here now is what you guys have probably encountered before, is you might have overlapping vertices. You might have multiple vertices there, which you will do, because that's got that one over there, and you basically just made them touch. You're not actually making them join together. So the way you combat that is you go into your mirror mode. You select them both, because when you're in mirror, it selects everything that there. If you don't have mirror mode on, when you do the selection tool like that, it'll only highlight what you can visibly see in your viewport. Whereas if you highlight it in your mirrored mode, it'll get every single thing, because it will go through that, it will x-ray through it. So I've got those. Literally all you do is press M for merge and then at center. Well, at center, they're already there. Give you an idea of what that means by at center. If I bring that down, if I grab that one and that one, if I press merge center, it'll bring it up to the center between both of them. Whereas if you do M at cursor, it will join up to where my cursor is up there, the 3D cursor, and M and collapse, and it just brings it in, same sort of thing as that center. So you always want to get into the position you need it to be first. So I'll pull that back up. Oh, God. Pull that back up where it was. To there. Select all both of those. Merge at center. So now there's only one vertex there, and they're all joining onto that one vertex. Otherwise there was 2 and they're overlapping, and when you come to finish up your model, it doesn't look very good. Cool. So, oh God, ignore that. So I'm going to finish up my model. Just going to join some bits on. Like that. Starting to get quite a funky shape. Pull this out a little bit like that. So it's looking quite spiky at the moment. And again, this shape has no relevance. There's not, there's no specific thing I'm actually modeling. It's just more of a test for this. So it's building up this piece at the end here. Oh god, put that one there. Join that. Join in that. Like that. So now I've got a finished model, and obviously you can't see the red, which is good. Obviously, you don't want the red there because that is your normals. Yeah, so F. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that one. So yeah, when you pull these out, if you want to join 2 or more vertices together, so if I want to fill this edge, select all the vertices and then press F to fill on there. Obviously, let's get some weird geometry there, which is ignore that. Cool. So what we're going to do now is start adding some detail in this. Now, for the time being, it's going to look ugly because it's all low poly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick on a subdivision surface, start smoothing it out. And the cool thing is, when you're in your subdivision, if you press and go tab and go into hello, if you press tab and go into your edit mode, you can still see your original shape before it's been subdivided. So you can start working with it and moving it around until you commit to your final one. So I'm not too happy with how this is looking. I think I can fix that, make it look a bit less jagged. In fact, what I'm going to do, because I don't like that.
It looks like a potato.
It does look like a potato, doesn't it?
It looked like something like a space shuttle thing.
A space potato.
And now it looks like a potato.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to do what I did the other side, and just fill it up to the other side. So, oh, 2, 3, 4. Put it in there. Some edge there, that's why. Go over the edges. What's happening there? I'm going to unhighlight my subdivision so you can't see it. See what's going on with my geometry. See, I'm getting some weird overlaps there. It's strange. So I'm going to cap off my model. Like that. Finish it up. And then subdivide it again. See what it looks like. Cool. There you go. So it's all finished up and it's all joined up together. Cool. So then I've got my weird potato capsule thing. What I want to do very quickly is just to subdivide it one more time, like that. Make a weird issue there, which I don't know what that is. What is that? Oh yeah. Blender is not your friend. don't think that for a second that Blender wants to be nice to you. It will not. It will test you at every page.
So like
every step.
Ramsay.
Yeah, 100%. Blender is the 3D version of Gordon Ramsay. It's an asshole. So it will test you and it will make you think on the spot. Even now, I'm having this weird splitting issue. I don't know where that's coming from, but you know what? This is what I like to do. Start again. So I'm gonna add my.
Just later on.
Yeah, do it again. It's all good. I'm gonna put my mirror modifier on. Mirror. There we go. So start pulling out some shapes. That, put clipping on. And there to there. And there.
The thing that you know when I was trying to make like a weapon, you said that the way that they did like certain bits was that they what was called I forgot what it similar to like how to make mountains.
Sculpting.
Sculpting.
Yeah.
How do we sculpt? Are you gonna show it this?
Yeah, I'll show you. So I'll get my little piece. This is my little dissertation piece, you know. So this is my FMP for this year. Do you like it? Beautiful.
It's already better than mine.
No. I hope you're gonna make better models than this. It's a little sure. Cool. Yeah. So back where I was. Put my subdivision on. I've got a potato. Lovely. So I'm gonna up my scale to that. And a good little trick as well, if you want to view things. Obviously, if you're not quite happy with subdivision, you don't want to take it off, but you want to not see it. The bar on these modifiers here, you've got this little strip here with the blue lit up buttons. This blue one with the camera will mean that when you render it, it won't render that modifier. If you press the one with the little TV screen, you can hide it from viewport, so you can't see it in the viewport. And that one there, I don't actually know, edit mode. Yes, it displays it in edit mode. So like I was saying, if you take that off, when there, you got that. If I display it in edit mode, it shows me it finished up. So they're cool little extra little tools that you'll find quite useful when using. So subdivisions, my favorite thing to do in them is using loop cuts. If you add loop cuts, it adds definition and sharpness to things. So if I put one in, you can see I can flatten edges out like that, make things look a bit neater, like that. And I've got a bread bin. And if I just do right click shade smooth, see I've got nice smooth edges and you can't see your polygons. So that's a big one to remember, is you right click and shade smooth. So, like I said, I want to start adding some details into this now. So what I probably want to start doing is adding some holes and some tubes and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a few, probably about that many loop cuts, yeah, about that. And each of these faces, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press I to inset them. But if you press I again, so there's two versions of inset. If you select multiple bits of geometry, you can use the 3. If I press I again, it does it individually. So you have multiple ones you can switch out in between. So press I constantly, it'll keep moving it in between like that. So you could join them up or have them scale individually. And they'll all scale at the same size as well, as long as your face is the same size. So if I selected every single face, press I could do every single one if I wanted to. See, that's not going to work. Sometimes it'll go a bit janky. So scale that in. I'm going to extrude this inwards now. We're starting to get some quite nice, more technical geometry. Considering I'm only using very blocky shapes. So if you press E to extrude, it will extrude it along the normal. So it'll extrude it along its local axis. So if it's facing a certain way, it will always extrude on the Z-axis, whatever direction it's facing. So if it's slanted, it will do the calculations for you. No, you literally press E and then pull it and it will do it. You can see the blue line, it comes up, it figures out what angle it's at and does it through there. So if I pull them in, you can see now they're sunken in, but they don't look very sharp. So if I'll do it again, make them a bit deeper. So they're sunken in there, but they don't look very sharp. So I'm going to go inside of it, and I can see I've got my edges. So if I press 2 to go to my edge selection. Beveling as well, adding more detail on your low poly things will give you more sharp surfaces on your model. So if I bevel those edges, you can see now I've got this sharper look to it. So you've got that up all the time. You can see now you've got a sharper thing. And again, if I do the edges of these ones, as well at the top here, which will be that. See now you're starting to get some really nice solid sharp shapes. And you haven't had to use the Boolean tool and cut things out of this. You've literally just gone and done that in your very simple. So if I took this off, this is literally your shape. This is literally what we're working with right now. Very, very simple. You guys can model that in a second. But as soon as you put that subdivision on, it starts to look really nice. So it's like really, really... So, in what way? Like, would you want to make it like more of a hexagonal or like a So the issue with that is that obviously when you put your subdivisions in, it will round every bit of geometry out. So it's quite hard to get your squares in there. That's when your normal maps and your texturing that comes in. When you add these small details, things like this, obviously you'd want to put it in as geometry. When you want to add just small little details of your sort of mechanical straight lines and things, you can either go and sculpt that in, or you can add it in as your detail in texturing. Texturing is a really powerful tool that will give you so much more than you know. So not over these. So if you wanted these to be more square, testing my sort of skills now really, it's kind of hard to do because subdivision, the nature of subdivision is smooth and round. That's how it sort of works. So that you'd probably add more geometry onto it. So you go and add your sort of cubes and apply that as a different model attached to it. Anything with a subdivision, if I bring in a cube, you can't lower the polygons really any more than that. And if I put a subdivision on it, it makes it round. That's just how subdivision works. It's always making things smoother because it's adding more geometry. So that's where you got to start thinking smart. And you say if you want to have something like this, but you want to have like a harder top, I guess what you could do on the top here, if I extruded that out and just did bevel the bottom as well.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. Like, if you have, like, let's say, a pie or a puzzle box and it's like a cylinder, you wanted square holes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could go and use the Boolean tool. So I'll show you that one actually as well. So if you wanted to put in a square hole into this, and actually, wait, hold on. I might be actually being stupid. If I go back, there is a tool called Mark Sharp. I might be right. No, that's not going to work. There's a tool called Mark Sharp. So if you've got edges that you want to be sharp and not smoothed out like this, what you can do is grab those to Mark Sharp. If I, yeah. That's not going to work in subdivision, is it? Mark Sharp, I think it's with the shade flat tool. It'll. Yeah, yeah. So you put your Boolean it in. So again, I'll do it on top actually. Get that over. If I apply my modifier quickly, apply that. If I bring in a cube, say I wanted to have a where is it? Boolean. Other way around. Boolean is one that always confuses me. You've got to add it in a certain order. So Boolean onto that one. Select my object, cut it out. Like that. Boolean. Apply that. Do that. Again, because of the subdivision, it's going to automatically make it dipped out and smooth out. But that's exactly what you do. So yeah, if I actually, I'll do that as well. Let's make it easier. So that subdivision, apply my subdivision. Go on that. Off. Add my object cube. That. Apply that. Do that. So now you got your square shape in there. The only issue with Booleans is that it messes up your geometry. So you can see there's no, like I said, you need to have those. That's already an n-gon. You've got an n-gon there. So that's more than 4 sides all over. You'd have to go and fix it. That's one thing I hate using Booleans because they really can mess up your mesh quite a bit. And you have to go and fix it. So it's a bit of a nightmare really with it. So I avoid them as much as I can. Unless if you're making things for use in Blender that you're not going to make into a game asset, it's a bit different. But if you're using it purely as an asset in an animation or in Blender alone, rendering it like that, it would be kind of all right. So it's not too bad. But yeah, it's a Boolean tool. I hate it, but I will show you guys how to use it. So I'm starting to get some quite cool sort of geometry on this. I might actually bring some of these in. Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it can be very unavoidable. It all just depends on what your model is and what other techniques you can use. So where am I to now? So I've got my mirror modifier, I've got my subdivider. What we want to do is cool. So I'm happy with that. So this model I'm pretty happy with. And I've used quite a few advanced things. What I might actually do is I might add some tubes on top. So these one here, so tubes and cylinder shapes, you need to get your initial extrusion as close to a square as possible. So I'll make that into square because the more square it is, the more equal of a circle cylindrical object is going to be. So press E now of that, and extrude it out. It's got these weird lumps. I'm going to delete the face of that to make it nice and topped off. And if I again get the bottom of these, bevel them, like that. You can see you can get more of a smoother shape, or you can do nice and tight one out of it. It depends on what you want to do. And that's looking pretty cool. So that's as simple as how to get a sort of cylinder shape coming out of any face you want. If you don't use subdivisions, what you can do is, I'll show you. Go to say this is your surface on your model. You're not using subdivisions. What you can do, literally loop cut it, have that, put 2 more in there, S and Y, S and X. At that point, you've got a tube coming out of your square, and then you can literally just do. Huh? It would, but in terms of advanced modeling, when you go into industry, what a lot of the time they do expect you to model things as a solid object. So knowing how topology works and knowing how you can bring other shapes out of other shapes is a really important tool to go into industry with. the way I do it, I model in both ways depending on what I'm modeling. So if I'm doing something quite advanced, I'll do stuff like this. If I'm modeling a quick asset, I'll just join things together and be a bit sort of messy with it. It's both are acceptable ways of modeling, completely acceptable. They're not a problem to use them. It just depends on what. Yeah, so it all depends on exactly that. So what your player's going to see and what you think is if you think it's an important enough model, yeah, yeah. So that's different. So what they call them is champion models. So champion models are ones that your character is going to see up close or get and see the detail. So again, if you're using a first-person weapon like a gun in a shooter, those models are going to be really high detail, really high poly because that's what you're seeing. About 60% of your screen is that gun, so you're going to be seeing it a lot of the time. Whereas your background buckets and that sort of thing are super low poly. If you go and play through, actually, we'll look at I'm advocating my favorite game. If you look at the Half-Life games, all of the props and things in the world, the physics objects and things like that, they're all really low poly, low texture because they're background stuff. Your weapons, the gravity gun, your crowbar, are all quite high poly, high texture because they're champion assets. You're going to see them close up. So it's all about balancing what's important and what memory to store and what, because games design is a bit of a puzzle when it comes to optimization. So knowing what needs to be high poly, knowing what needs to be low poly. For example, I think I've actually said this before. I think I told you, Ryan, yesterday. But with models, poly count, don't worry as much. Don't be pedantic with it. To give you an example, champion assets like a weapon or a gun can be about 10 to 15,000 polygons. That's the acceptable average. And a character model in a video game can be about 100,000 polygons. So that is acceptable amount. So if you're panicking that your models are too high poly, don't worry at all because these games have games these days, and especially looking at Unreal Engine 5, which has a system apparently where we don't need normal maps. It's all you can have millions of polygons and it will run it fine. Don't worry. I'll wait till I see it. That's what I'm waiting for. But yeah, so don't worry too much about your poly counts. Yes. Yeah. So it depends. You can use textures to do that sort of stuff. Or you can kind of model in Adobe Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator, you can write. It uses what's it called? Not Vertex. Vector uses vectors to draw. And you can import them as they're called SVG files. You can import them into Blender, and it gives it geometry, and then you can extrude that out. So if you had a really complex shape, you could draw it in it's in 2D, bring it into your 3D program and extrude it and make it into 3D. So it's a different way of modeling completely. There's so many different ways you can do stuff. And Photoshop does it as well. You do it with Photoshop, I think it's more complex. It doesn't use vectors. There is technique. But yeah, so that's one way of modeling. So I'm going to show you one more thing, and I'm going to show you some UV unwrapping so you guys can get an idea of how that works. So if you want to get some cool pipes and bending shapes, there is a tool in Blender for that. It's called the spin tool, and it's really cool. It's how you get really accurate sort of bends, that sort of thing. So if I go to my side view with 3, I've selected this top face here. I'm gonna bend this out like a sort of exhaust pipe. So first of all, what I need to do is I'm gonna pop that myself back into increment because I'm gonna get this lined up with that top line there. So I'm aligned with that line pretty much. I'm then going to think, right, where do I want my pipe to pivot around? How tight do I want my pipe to be? So if I put it here, it's going to be quite a tight bend, whereas I put it over here, it's going to be quite a loose bend. So I'm going to put it about there. So holding shift and then right click, I can replace my origin. And that origin is going to act as the pivot point for this tool. Shift and right click, yeah. So I placed it in there. So now if I go to my bottom panel down here, see this little spin tool? You get this little green or blue anchor. If I pull that, not that one, sorry, if I just pull it in space, you can see, if I hold control, it'll snap it. You can get the angles here. You can see on this little dial, got this angle.
What's that do then? I've lost track, sorry.
Sorry, so what it does is, I want to get a curved pipe coming out of this. So if you wanted to, you could go and model that and you'd be like, yeah, cool, and then rotate that, and then E, and then rotate that, and then E. You could do
That's
that.
a lot of time.
Take a lot of time, and it's a pain in the ass, and it won't be accurate. It won't be very accurate at all. Whereas if you let the computer do it, and go using that origin point, pull that out.
Wait, so how did you do that then? Oh.
So I put that origin point. That's the pivot point.
Yeah.
I selected that top edge there.
Yeah.
And
it
then
clicked.
literally get the spin tool, which is down here.
I did.
Yeah. And then literally just in space anywhere you want, grab and pull. Hold control and it snaps it to the angles. Like that. It uses anything, absolutely anything. So if I go and get so if I want to get if I make this into any shape, really, like that. Like that. I'm going to flatten this. So if I make that flattened. Oh, yeah, this is another little trick actually I'll show you. If you want something to be flat, anything to flat on any axis, S to scale, I'm doing it on the Z axis to Z, and then 0. And it flattens it out completely. Like that. So that's a cool little trick I always use. So, again, if I put my pivot point here, get my spin tool, like that. Now I have a really weird shape pulled out and spun out from 90, or 0 to 90. So it's a really, really cool tool. And I actually love it. I only discovered it about a year ago, and I'm like, I use it constantly.
That makes things so much easier.
It's good, isn't it? No. I'm saving it for this year, you see. I'm saving it for your advanced modelling. Unless I get into the zone and I'm starting doing this, I forget half these tools, honestly. There's hundreds of them. So, now I've got this bend. I could do the same thing the other way. So if I look at where my bend's hitting here, so I'm going to go to here. This is where I want to pivot again. If I then go like that.
It doesn't matter where you put it then.
So that point there, it matters quite a bit. As long as it needs to be in line with this, because that's where it's going to start pivoting from. So you think of angles, you've got your 90 degrees, and it's got to have a pivot point here. It's got to be alongside the same length. It's got to go like that. So it's got to pivot around here. So it's got to be in line with your line starting. If I put it down here, it goes funny, see?
Oh, so if you want to create special shapes and
If you want some funky things, yeah, you could literally do that, and it will be a weirder shape, it'll be more of a snap, but it won't look great. It depends on what you need. What do you say, Ryan? I want the origin point. So if you do Shift S, you get this little menu, and you go cursor to world origin. It puts it back to 0. All right, so that's all right. And what I'm going to do, guys, what I'll do is I'm going to make up and then send you guys because I sent you the Blender cheat sheet last year. I'm going to make a more advanced version so you have some of these more advanced tools and techniques. Cool, so then matrix tool, that's a good point. Yeah, that's what you did in the beginning. Yeah, I'll look into that because it probably does in some way, shape, or form. But yeah,
just
random shapes. Yeah, it'd be great. What I'm gonna do with this, I'm gonna loop it back around. So I put for example, you can put your pivot point there. And if I do that, maybe not that far in. Maybe do it a bit more. Here. Exactly. So these won't ever get n-gons because they're always going to be equal no matter what. They're always going to be maybe polygons. And it only depends on your mesh you're pulling out. So if you do a spin tool with an n-gon, you're going to get loads of n-gons. You always make sure your mesh is fine. So if I do that. Oh. Now a cool thing you can do with this, like anything else in Blender. So I selected the loop. So that you get the loop on the top. I cut the top off, selected the loop. But what you can do with this, which is really cool, you can add, in fact, I'm going to make it different again. This is there. So I make a big spin, like that. Make it straight. It's quite low poly. It's not looking great. You can add more polygons to this. So steps is how many times and how much detail it is. So you can add loads of detail. Make it really jagged, like that. So I'm going to add about 26. Yeah, so the good thing is, because it's already shade smooth and it's already subdivided, you can see it's already nice and smooth for me. And we get some really funky shapes that you can start messing around with. So now I can just go...
It started to look like Loki helmet.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, it's got little bends and curves. It's great. But what I could do now is I could join this up now. So if I did that, And if I do a bit extra, so again, using those snapping tools, if I go and get my edge, if I click this one, and I want it to line up with this, G and then Y, grab that, G, X, that, G, Y, oh, Y, click to that, G, X, look at that. So now they are exactly the same distance apart. Delete that face, select that loop, select that loop, oh, select that loop, and that loop. If I do right click, and I go bridge edge loops, I've joined it.
Yeah.
So now it is one solid. So if you find your loop, hold Alt, go into edge selection, hold Alt, and then click it, it will select the loop around it. Cool. So happy with that. It's looking pretty good. It's a pretty funky shape for no reason whatsoever. What? Yes, yeah, looking good. So all I need to do now, I say I'm finished with this model now. All I need to do is go to my mirror modifier and apply that, then apply some subdivisions, and now it's looking pretty good. But what I might actually do first, lower that once. Yeah. So if you want it, yeah. So what you do in Unreal, and Unreal's really easy for it. So you'd model the, say if it's a character and you have cloth apron or something, or a dress, something like that. Yeah. So did you want it to be static or do you want it to be moving? Moving. So if you want it to be moving, you would model it in Blender and just leave it as it is. Then in Unreal, there's a cloth setting where you can paint the polygons that need to be cloth simulated. And you do that, and it will just activate instantly, and it will be interactable with physics, which is quite cool. Cool, so now you've got the horrible, horrible, horrible task of UV unwrapping this. That's not fun. So you've gone, oh cool, I've got my cool shape, it's great. And what you want to do, what I advise, is before you apply your subdivision, UV unwrap it first, because otherwise you're going into horrible territory and you've got to go and select loops with this, and it's just, there's a lot of polygons, it's very confusing, and I can't be asked to do that. So what I would do is make sure I'm in my low poly version, which I've got here, and I start figuring out how I'm going to do this. So I go to my UV editing panel. I select it now, it's an absolute mess. That's not good. That's not what we want. So look at that, it's all overlapping itself and it's all just absolutely everywhere. So UV unwrapping, I think so you can see there, this big line is crossing over. You've got lines crossing themselves, and that's not good. You can't have things crossing over. That thing it's laying over the top of that. You see all that, it's an absolute, look at that, I can keep going forever, like, to pull it apart, it's just terrible. So you could straight away just go UV and unwrap. It's not going to work because it can't figure out what the hell's going on. You could be very lazy and get a horrible UV unwrap mesh by going to Smart UV Project, and it will lay it out all flat for you. Now, if you bring that into Substance Painter, it'll actually like that, because Substance Painter
it's a smart program.
It's very smart, and it figures out your curves, figures out your edges, and you can paint straight over those lines. It doesn't care, which is pretty cool. But in terms of basic practice and being a good person and a good modeler, exactly. If you gave that to, if you were working in industry and you gave that mesh and that UV map to a texture artist, they'd slap you in the face. They'd hate you because. So they will do, but still, in terms of other reasons as well, if you use that for Substance Painter, it will work. Take it to Unreal Engine, there's things like light maps, there's things like that, where it calculates the shadows and things, and it will hate it. It won't work. Depends on how big the company is. So if you are working on an indie company and you are an environment artist, you'll do the whole lot. You'll do the whole pipeline of modeling. You'll take it from the concept IS, you'll model it, texture it, position it. If you're working in somewhere like, I don't know, Ubisoft, EA, huge company, a huge production studio, you will most likely, if you're one of the environment artists, you'll be tasked on making some assets. There'll be texture artists that work in house that will then take it from you, texture it how they want, because it's a skill in itself. If you can do it all, then that's really good, you know. And it's good to have that knowledge anyway going into it. But yeah, exactly. There you go. So this is going to be an absolute terror to model, to UV unwrap. So one thing I'm going to do first, I've just noticed what I've done a bit wrong. I've added an extra loop here that doesn't actually need to be here. So using the same thing as I did before, that merge, if I just go down to here, go down to my vertice, at center,
I hate the light because it's just shining onto the board.
I know, yeah, you
See
can
one
see it
side.
there if it's a bit easy for you, mate. You can see it, isn't it? We need curtains. Curtains are essential. I know. I don't know if they've been fixed yet, aren't they?
I was going to say the building. It's like it looks horrible, and we teach architecture here.
I know. It's weird, isn't it? It's a very weird dynamic. I know. Well, I do a CAD course. I've been learning CAD recently. And the bloke Ben who is teaching me, he's got the plans for this place on CAD, and it's an absolute mess. It's yeah, it's not. It doesn't.
You learning?
CAD. So AutoCAD is a 2D engineering software where you can design assets and things. You can design engineering parts, basically like car parts and that sort of thing. And architecture and buildings, you can do all that with it. It's a really cool software to learn. But yeah. Yes, it's great. And you can see, I looked on the building of it, and it's just, yeah, it's an absolute mess. This entire place.
To me, boring work.
It's fun because I find it fun because it's like a puzzle. Something you'll be given these diagrams you've got to recreate in CAD and get all the measurements and the diameters and things. It all depends on the sort of person you are, I think, definitely. So sculpting, and I'll show that now actually. So little bit, yeah, algebra and sort of tangents and that sort of thing. Yeah. So I've got this here. No, me neither, mate. So sculpting. Actually, I'll go into sculpting first. We'll do some of that. Sculpting, you need high poly. So we've got high poly. We've got subdivision on there. And if you have low poly, it's not going to sculpt. It's not going to let you do it because you need all that data to move. So it's exactly. So I've got my subdivision on. I've got it on level 3, so I've got quite a lot of geometry there. So now I should be able to say that. If I apply that, you can see, you need to make sure it's applied. And now I can literally start carving into this like that. So if I wanted to, on there, clay.
So what would you use sculpting for? That's what I always.
So sculpting is what you'd use it to add detail. So say if I wanted these pipes to look a bit more like broken and dented and bent, what I'd do is I'd put the strength down a bit on that. Is it up? Make it smaller. I would put a very slight. So let me do it. Right, I'll put it here actually. I'll put some slight dents in. So I'm only holding control here and just doing the opposite. I'm not adding clay, I'm taking it away. I'm smoothing it out a little bit and bring it in. So you could do, yeah. So and what you could actually do in Blender, if you wanted a custom normal maps, if you wanted to make things directly rooted to your model, you could sculpt in this, bake it to a normal map, and then bring that in as a normal map. So if you were making wood, like a wood panel, and you wanted to carve out the wood and make it your own and not just use someone else's normal map, you could carve out and make the wood details in this really high poly, bake it out as a normal map, and then use it as a texture. Yeah, you should keep a low poly version, and then this next one you'd make it really high poly, do all your details and carving. You'd bake all of that detail into a texture image, which would then allow you to use it, on the low poly version. So that's an extra step to advanced modeling, which I'll probably show you guys next week at some point.
I used to do like a video.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do the video for that. Yeah.
The thing with me is that it hate for me is that I'm trying to learn to do this like my brain just goes far like that.
Yes, I did say, mate. I said things I remember. I forget stuff all the time. But the thing is, now I put my sculpting in. Actually, a cool little thing you can do in this one here, in the viewport shading. Go to this. Go on that drop down here. You'll be able to see, not that one, sorry. That one there. Keep to your clay one, sorry. Go to your drop down. You've got matte cap. Make sure that's selected. If you click on this, these are your sort of visualizing modes, and they're ways you can see your detail in a different way. So I click on this one here. It's got a bit more shininess, and you can see that specular light there. It'll highlight to me where all my little imperfections and my little sculpting things I've done are. So there's nothing. Yeah, you can, yeah. So all this is doing is putting a shader on it just to show you what it looks like. So I can sculpt in this like that, and you can see I can add. It is literally it's just a shader. So this one wouldn't actually, it wouldn't come out of Blender and be able to be used because this is more like a look dev version. This is to help you with your modeling, but you could make something like this in Blender. Yeah. All these stuff. These are all to aid with your modeling. So this things like this will show you. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, 100%, very easily. They're just cool things. Yeah, I use these constantly when I'm sculpting stuff. It just gives you a good idea. And even that, you can see where the bends are. That if they didn't sculpt anything in this, there wouldn't be any warpiness. It will be straight. So you can see where I put the sort of bumpiness to it. Huh? No, no, never. And in fact, a cool little thing that you can do with sculpting is there's a thing I'll show you. It'd be interesting to you as well. You've got a thing called Dynotopo, so dynamic topology. So what dynamic topology does is when you sculpt, it'll add geometry to it. So it will add so it will remesh it a little bit. I'll show you an idea of what I mean. So I'll tick that box, click OK, go on here, keep it about 12 pixels. That's absolutely fine. And you want to keep smooth shading on. So if I want to add some sharp lines to it, what I can do is. Yeah, essentially, yeah. So yeah. So what Dynotopo does as well, Dynotopo will add that detail, that extra geometry in there. So it's literally just using different brushes to move the geometry around. So you can see here I've just got this empty plane here. If I go and sculpt this like that, all I've done is I've used that and it's to pull the geometry up. So it hasn't added more, it hasn't taken away, it's just moving it in a certain way. And that's all it's doing. Sculpting is literally just taking the geometry you've got and moving it around. Yeah. Either that, or if you're making custom, like if you want to make a normal map and you want to add some really tiny detail and stuff. So if down here I wanted to add some like weld marks or something, and then I wanted to bake that out as a text, as a normal map, you'd use Dynotopo for that to add that detail. So I've already so if I take this, right, so say this is it's quite hard to do really because I've got not with my UV, because you always need your UV map done first for that. I'll use this one for now. So if where am I to? Copy and paste this, so Shift D, I've got another one there. I'm going to rename this one here my low poly. I say low poly, it's already quite high poly. So this one here, I had that one. This is going to be my low poly, so it's quite high poly, but let's say it's low poly. And then this one here, I'll rename this to high poly. A little top tip as well, F2 is your universal renaming tool for any Windows software. So you click on something, press F2, it'll put you into renaming. It's a quick way of doing it. So my high poly one, this is what I'm going to do all my... Huh? This is true. But I know you guys hate the Macs and will use Windows for the rest of your life, so remember it. So yeah, so I've got a high poly one here, which is what I'm going to start sculpting on. My low poly is going to be what my asset in the game is going to be. So if I... For instance,
when you said, "Oh, that you guys hate Mac," I'm like, "Wait, what? I've lost the plot here."
That's right, man. It's not a problem. Basically, I said that if you use Windows, F2 is a so on F2 on your keyboard is a universal key press for renaming something. So I select my something up here, press F2, it'll put me to renaming. Just type what I want to type. Just makes your workflow easier. Little keyboard commands. So if I hide the low poly and bring in my hide the low poly, bring in my high poly. What I could do with this now, I'm going to add another subdivision on it, make it really high. It's going to hate me for it. Like that. And then what I'm going to start doing is sculpting my detail on it. So they build up, strength quite high, pitch quite low. So the issue is my laptop's gonna be like a bit slow because there's probably about 1 million or so polygons on this now. It's quite a lot of polygons on there. Softwares like ZBrush will handle polygons a lot easier. That's why it's really good. You can do like 2 million, 3 million polygon sculpts constantly on that. It handles it well. Blender isn't amazing for it, as you can see by my slowing down. ZBrush is a sculpting software. This is the most famous one really for it. So it's what most studios will use for character modeling. Yeah, so you can import your model. So ZBrush isn't very good for hard surface stuff. If you want to add detail to your hard surface stuff, you bring it into ZBrush, sculpt in it, export it out, that sort of thing. It's a whole pipeline people choose. Depends on what pipeline you like to use, really. Some people would go for that one.
So if you're making a character model,
Yeah.
would you make the base of it here and then bring it into
It depends. If you're someone that prefers using ZBrush, you'd make it in ZBrush straight away. If you want to sculpt more on a character that's already done, you build your base mesh in this hard surface, model it, and then bring it into ZBrush and then start adding your detail. It all depends on how you work. 3D is really open to different pipelines. So if you want to work in Blender for the whole thing and make your character in Blender for the whole thing, you can. If you want to go in Blender and make your base mesh, bring it into ZBrush, add your detail, bring it back into Blender. Yeah, exactly. So how I would do characters, I don't. So if I were to do characters,
if I do characters, I normally go to lowest.
Yeah. No. If I did characters, I would start in Blender. I would probably add, make my base mesh in Blender. But in fact, if I was to do a character, 9 times out of 10 in studios, you won't make that base mesh. You'll never have to make it. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I would, I'd make it in Blender, make my character in Blender. Personally, I would add, because ZBrush is about £400 a year, so I wouldn't pay for it. There's no student license for it either, which is a pain. So I would stay in Blender. I would add my details in Blender.
A couple of friends would say, "Hey, why don't we split it?"
Let's chip in, yeah. Can't use it all at the same time, that's the thing. They'll know.
Will that?
Yeah, they will, yeah. ZBrush is really on it. They're absolute nightmares for it. But yeah, I would, if I, in a perfect world, if I had ZBrush, I'd use ZBrush, but it's very expensive, so I won't. So I will use Blender for modeling, sculpting, detailing, and then I'd go to Substance Painter for texturing, because it's fantastic. And then Photoshop if I need to do any touch-ups or any additional things. If I need to make any, say if my character has tattoos, if I need to go make a tattoo to stick on them as a texture, I'd go make it in Photoshop, that sort of thing. And then I'd bring it straight and then be done then. Bring it back into Blender just to check over the textures, make sure they're all right, and then bring it straight to Unreal. That's how I'd do it. That's my route of characters.
It's a champion one when you do streaming. So do you like that? Spheres is like
Red eyes. No, if it's champion one, I like that spheres. Yeah, I'd do it as high detail as possible because you want to see that asset for the entirety of the game. Oh yeah. So things like that, things like eyes and teeth and mouth and that sort of thing. So if you see characters, you'll see character models all the time, and you'll see that their eyes and their mouth is all separate. So they have a weird, like if you look inside their, you'll see their little mouth and their teeth and things. You'll see their eyes because they move separately from the body because they're the eyes are looking around like that. That's hard to rig. If you have it separate models, you can rig it so they look around it easier. There's certain practices that will go against the sort of common rules that I'll say, but some will stick to them. So I'm going to save the baking actually, the normal baking for next week because it's quite not lengthy, but it can be quite confusing. I don't want to overload you guys with too much, so I'll do that next week because I think that'll be useful for you guys to learn. So I'll do that for now. But I'll do some UV unwrapping. I'm going to leave this model and not UV unwrap this because it's evil and this will take ages to unwrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to
start doing so now.
Yeah.
Save the recording. So it's not too.
I will.